normal, like pre-COVID IETF,
They're
which
confused.
I had a hard time believing, but then I thought,
I
well,
think they're looking at the total attendance, remote and.
So we're at the top of the hour.
okay.
So we should get started. We definitely have less people in the room physically and virtually than normal, but welcome to Netmod at IETF 113. You have the chairs, myself, Lou Berger, Kent Watson, and Joel Chegley. And in the room, we have Charles Eckel, who's volunteered to help us out. Doesn't look like he's going to have too many people in there to to manage, but we appreciate the help very much. As this is the IETF, we have our note well, which talks about our rules governing our participation in these meetings, in our mail lists, and in the physical and virtual hallways. And if you're unfamiliar with it, please take a look at the note well. Similarly, we also have a code of conduct that talks about how we should treat each other professionally and with respect. On the administrative side, we are using Meet Echo for queue control. There actually is a nice slide for those who are local that talks about how to do that. But we're in the second day now, and all 3 or 4 of you are professionals at this point at the new Meet Echo tool. For the rest of us, you're hearing this, so you've made it. Welcome. I've put the note-taking link in the chat. Also, there's a nice button from Meet Echo to take you there. Please jump onto that, the Hedge Doc, the notes page, and help ensure that we capture any of the discussion in the meeting. You don't have to capture all the presentation, just the discussions. All material is posted, and we're driving it from presentation from that, from the data tracker and from the material manager. First up on our agenda is the important topic that we've been working about, versioning, and we've had 2 documents go through working group last call recently, and we have another set of documents that we're hoping to last call soon, but the authors tell us there's some issues to work through, and that's what we'll be trying to do here. If you look at the Hedge Doc, you'll see that there's a version of a slightly modified version of the agenda in there. And you'll see first up, the overview is going to be covered by Joe Clark. So that's the first TBD. And then Yang Packages is going to be covered by Jean. We have several non-chartered items as well. And of course, the node tags, which is the working group document. Since the last meeting, we've had several RFCs published. That's great. After all, that's why we're here, is to get these documents through the process. Appreciate everyone who worked on it, whether you were author, contributor, or just working group member who commented on it. So thanks all for getting us over the hurdle of getting those documents published. We have 2 documents which are almost perpetually post last call, waiting on a minor update and expired. And I was going to put the author on the spot. I saw he was about to move. Maybe he wants to come to the mic and say something.
Yes, Rob Wilson Cisco. So yes, I had tried to find a co-author to help with this late last year, and that fell through. And there's someone else who's interested, Scott Mansfield said he might be interested, so I'll chase to see if I can get him. But I think having somebody else to help me on finishing these would be helpful. But otherwise, I still want to get them completed. It's just finding the time with all the other workload. So apologies.
Just occurred to me, maybe reach out to Don, who commented on it earlier, and see if he'll help you out, because I know he's become more active in the IETF. Don Fedek. try him. We can talk offline. Okay. Yeah, we look forward to like getting that done. They're very useful pieces of work, and we don't want to lose that went there. All the effort that went into that. We have 3 others. I mentioned the last 2.
But we have Scott Mansfield in the queue.
Go ahead. Oh,
We have
Scott, please go
Mansfield in the
ahead.
queue.
Sorry, I missed that.
Scott, did you want to say something? Scott, we can't hear you. He had some issues yesterday with his mic also.
I don't. Oh, there we go. Oh, we lost
Okay.
him.
All right.
Scott, just for your information, I never saw the mic button go the color it means that you're unmuted, so you were muted that whole time. Kent, do you want to add anything about 6991?
Only that it completed working group last call, and I think it's on me now to do the Shepherd write-up and move it through the process.
Okay, great. Yeah, on the other versioning documents, we did get some comments. I believe a new rev is needed. These documents will, once they're complete, we will hold them until the whole set is ready to go. So there's other documents that are on the agenda until they're ready. Once they're also passed working group last call, we'll put them through the ISG as a set so they can be processed as a set. That's our plan. We have one document that was returned to the working group. It's not on the agenda. It needs some, it doesn't need a lot of work, but it needs someone to pick this up to really close on it. Kent, you're looking for a volunteer to help out there, right?
Volunteer for syslog?
Yeah. Or do you think that's covered?
Yes, if someone could help with that. It's a working group document. It doesn't need to be the original authors. Really, all that needs to be done right now is to update the examples. I mean, originally it was to go through the whole thing to make sure, what all the needed updates are. But I think a quick review, and I feel like it's probably just a matter of updating the examples and then putting it back into the queue. That's all we need. Someone to help us with that. Very easy.
Right. Well, if anyone's willing, please contact the chairs, or even better, just suggest changes on the list, and then we can close this document out and bring it back to the ISG. We've had no incoming liaisons or communications, and I think we all are well adept at working remote. Just a reminder, though, that we can do formal interims, and if you have a topic that you'd like to request to be a formal interim, just contact the chairs. And with that, we're ready to move on to the versioning updates. Joe, are you here? You're here.
Yeah,
I'm going to pass slide control. Oh, you're in the room. Even better.
Hey, Joe.
Charles, do you want to take slide control, or I'll send it to you?
Is there a thing, or you just switch
Okay.
slides for me?
I don't know if we don't have a clicker for you,
Okay.
so you might need to tell me. I can.
For future speakers, the app lets you do that if you had the Meet Echo app, but since you don't, I gave it to
Okay.
I
Charles.
got it.
Cool. This is, even though on the agenda it says that this is going to be mainly on module versioning, and Jan would cover SimVer, this is going to cover kind of an intro of where we are, as well as module versioning and SimVer. I'm Joe Clark, your host for this particular part of the program. Next slide, please, Charles. So that's me. It says Rob will be presenting packages, but Jan will actually be presenting packages. And in this deck, We have some backup slides that cover kind of the wherefore, some examples, but we won't bore you with that. We'll just focus on what has changed since 112. Next slide, please. So just as a recap, these are the 5 from the requirements doc. These are the 5 drafts that we are going to come up with, some of which have already happened, and we'll be focusing on the semantic versioning and the module versioning. And then, as I mentioned, Jan will get into packages. And the next set of work in the order that we are going to look at it are the protocol operations. So version selection is next, and then the tooling around all of this, the related Yang tooling to process the versions, to look at like the lineage of these Yang modules. All of our work is being tracked in Git, so we kept the old design team Git repo. We have issues there, and next slide, please. We meet regularly every Tuesday. In fact, today is a Tuesday, and we are going to have, or at least attempt to have, our meeting today. It is at 2 p.m. or daylight savings time. We're kind of in this interesting bubble where the US switched and the rest of the world hasn't yet. But generally, it's around 9 a.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. in the UK. We have a number of representatives that attend, consisting of operators, various vendors, where we discuss all of these 5 drafts, and we've kind of been tackling them in the order that you saw on the previous slide. These meetings are open to all. We host them on WebEx. The chairs set that up. So by all means, you are free. Anyone is free out there. I think most of the people in this room actually attend those meetings, but you're free to join and help us with these discussions. We bring back minutes, and we bring back discussion points to the list. Jason Stern has typically been doing that, so you'll see updates on the Netmod list as we discuss things. Next slide, please. So what have we been doing since 112? As Lou mentioned, we got the module versioning and we got the SEMVer drafts into last call, and we'll talk about the comments we got on those in a bit. So we've been focusing mainly on the packages, on what is the kind of the wherefore, the why of Yang packages. What does the structure of those look like? We've explored different kind of different layouts or different architectures for that, opening and closing some issues. We've talked about different types of packages, and Jan will get into this idea of an API package versus an implementation package, as well as what is the metadata around Yang packages, what does that look like, and what are the use cases. That led to, as I mentioned, a ton of issues, and we've been working through them. What's going to happen next, as we'll see, is we're going to focus back on the working group last call comments that we've received on the 2 drafts already, as well as continuing in this packages work. Next slide, please. So, module versioning. So this was the first draft, and that leads into SEMVer. We just closed working group last call. Lou mentioned there will be a revision, at least one revision of this draft. Jürgen, Italo, and Andy brought up issues. We haven't had a chance yet on the kind of the authors contributors call to go through all of these. That's going to be kicked off probably today if we get some critical mass, but certainly in the next few weeks we'll be discussing these issues, and you see some of them there. We had some contradictions in normative language around file names, and ultimately we want to clarify and improve and discuss different ways or different complexities with the solution, so that we're, for the most part, from a consensus standpoint, that we're comfortable with what the Yang versioning, the module versioning solution presents and how it will be used. Next slide, please.
Joe, before you go on,
Yeah, sure.
I should have mentioned that based on the update, we'll decide whether there needs to be a second last call. If it's mainly editorial and consistency checks changes, we won't do a last call. But if there's something really substantive there that needs to be discussed at the working group, we will. My feeling right now is leaning towards not, but if the authors feel differently, that's important input also. Thank you.
Thanks. We will, I kind of evaluate some of what Jürgen, Andy, and Italo, especially on module versioning, have said as kind of like what an AD might do with a discuss. I think it's going to require a lot of that discussion back and forth, and the changes that come out of that, as you said, we'll see the level of substantive change that needs to happen, and perhaps another last call might be warranted. With the SEMVer draft, mainly Jürgen responded, but Italo will actually look at Italo's comment in a second here. Some of Jürgen's changes were fairly editorial in nature. He recognized some typos, some things that were quote unquote low-hanging fruit to fix. They have already been fixed in our Git repository. However, there were some things that will require that additional discussion. And so I've raised issues for that, and we're going to go through them. Again, anyone's free to join and help us with those conversations, and we'll get back to the list. So we're not ignoring you, Jürgen. We will get back and address these items that we have as issues here. Next slide, please. Italo's comment was interesting. So he asked, what about in like the code begins or in RFC version 3 format, the source code, since we're proposing an alternative file name, and the alternative file name is with the revision label, which can be a Yang SEMVer, we would, in the module versioning draft, we state that you'll use a hash mark to delineate that what comes after is a revision label. Italo asks, should we change the code begins and the source code tags in the internet draft language to accept those alternate file names? And if we do things other than revision date, do we run the risk of blowing up the line length? Because you could have a fairly long module name with some ridiculously long revision label as well. So we discussed this a little bit. And the consensus among the contributors is keep it either as it is now, or Rob is actually fairly keen on, what if we stipulate that don't include anything, just the module name, and this is where tooling will come in and find the latest revision in the module and extract that to a file as both module name at revision date and module name pound or hash revision label as is present in the module. This way it's a little simpler. It actually reduces some of the errors we've seen in extracting modules where people change the revision but they don't change the code begins tag, and hilarity ensues with the Zim tool and what's happening in the data tracker and Yang catalog. So we're going to figure out what's the best solution. Do we leave things as they are now? That's obviously easiest. Or do we add some text that says, we recommend not including the revision date there either, and leave it up to tooling to do the right thing. So that's kind of the one issue we discussed. We are, of course, open in all of these to what the working group may want to suggest or offer in terms of guidance. Next slide, please. The other big thing that was raised, so Jürgen commented on the last call on that thread that Lou started, and then started a new thread in parallel to that with an alternative to Yang SEMVer and to some degree the module versioning as well. And just by way of an example, and this is directly from his email, what if on every node where there is a non-backward compatible change, that's NBC, non-backwards compatible, there is a tag that is added, NBC change as an example, listing the revision date at which that non-backwards compatible change was introduced, and then describing what that non-backwards compatible, the semantic change the semantic change that was done. In the beginning, a while back, when we first started talking about Yang versioning, this was brought up. There was some discussion with this. There was some back and forth that maybe this would add too much verbosity. This could be something that gets moved into the tooling section, but it needs further discussion. We fully admit we've read this. We've heard both Jürgen and Andy's comments here, or read them, I should say, and we're going to discuss this further and decide what the response, what the action to take here is going to be. So this is going to be one of those items that gets added onto the to-do list for our weekly calls after this meeting. Next slide, please. All right. So this takes me towards the end of my section, and I'll be handing things over to Jan. As I mentioned, we're discussing these weekly, the issues here. You can look at our whole issue tracker at the GitHub project link there. And you can also look at the latest revisions of all of the drafts and see what state we are, even if before we publish to a data tracker. Going forward, we're absolutely going to address those working group last call comments that we got on versioning and Semver. We're still focusing very much on the packages draft and getting a lot of good input from the various participants on our contributors call. And then we're going to break into those final two work items on version selection and the schema comparison, or the tooling, as it were, once we're kind of getting to that same last call state for packages. So any questions before I hand over to Jan? I just see Jan in the queue. I think unless Jan, you have a question, I think you're there to present, and I can relinquish the floor.
Yeah, I'm ready if you like.
Thanks, Charles.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Joe. Jan, do you already have control of the slides, or do you need that?
I seem not to have.
Okay, I'll give it. You should have it in just a sec.
Yeah, for some reason, it's not letting me switch slides right now.
So Jan, you should have it.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, works now. So I don't know
We
where
have
is the...
presentations, Charles.
Oh, all right, okay.
Okay, there were more slides in that one, so I thought he was taking over.
No, it's the next presentation. I don't know why it's not letting me have to do it now.
Let
Maybe
me,
you have to pass control back to me.
I'm doing that now then.
That's odd.
Do you have control yet, Lou?
No, it says it's taken. So maybe you can do that if you have control.
Okay.
Oh, no, I think I can do it. Here, I got
You got it
remote.
now?
Yes.
It's just a little slow.
There it is. Thank you. Oh, but I lost
And you
control.
now have control. And you now
All
have
right,
control.
thanks.
And for others, you have to take control, revoke control, and then you have to, then you can make the change and then give control. All right, thanks. We're all learning.
Thank you. So first, a few updates on what's happened since 1.12. And one of the things we've been talking about is something we call issue 57. It's about what we do with mount points when they appear in packages. I mean, mount points are not used extensively at this time, but over time they may be more common. And the question is, what do we do if there is a mount point inside a package? Should we in some way prescribe or allow an implementation to prescribe what sort of packages that may end up being mounted on that mount point or not? And it's an open discussion, let's say. Another thing we tried or discussed is about how packages are communicated when you connect to a device. How do you know which packages are implemented on this device? I mean, if you remember from my discussion earlier about how netconf performance can be increased, I took a real-world application and measured it for 1 hour and all the traffic that was sent there to a particular device. And we found that in that particular real-world application, 91% of all the traffic was hello messages. And that's kind of high, but that was of course a device that was using a lot of Yang 1.0 modules. With Yang 1.1, the traffic will of course reduce dramatically when it comes to hello messages. But in principle, the mechanism for finding out what's available on a device is still fairly similar even with Yang library. It's just that you are exchanging the information in Yang library less often. But what we can do with packages is then to try to reduce the gap with how people think about what's running on a device. We don't generally go around and list and say, what's this device doing? And then you list 1,000 modules. We think of it as functional groups, something like packages. But now we have a number of different mechanisms that a client needs to understand in order to be able to manage a device generically. We have the Yang 1.0 mechanism with hello. We have the Yang 1.1 mechanism with the Yang library. We have netconf monitoring, and it's starting to build up with different mechanisms that you need to understand. And packages would be the fifth mechanism adding to the list of things you need to understand to do this. So we had a discussion of could we maybe integrate this into Yang library in some way to reduce the gap and to reduce the amount of code that you need to have in order to understand. But in the end, we gave up and found that the gain of trying to integrate those two was not really making things easier anyway in the end. So we have to live with 5 different mechanisms. We had talking about the issues 133 and 135 about optional packages or optional modules that are optionally part of a package, and this ties back with this discussion that I'll show you in a few slides about API and implementation packages. But while we, of course, are interested in a lot of flexibility when it comes to the package concept, flexibility is also creating complexity. So we are looking for the right balance there. We talked about adding revision labels for packages, and we decided that we'll propose to IETF must use Yang Semver labels for packages, and we recommend that other organizations should use that. Another concern we have had is how deviations are part of packages, and we updated the text to make it even more clear that a standardization body cannot use deviations in their definitions. And the reason for that is that that would basically create a SDO war. We cannot, an implementer cannot implement an SDO that is leveraging another SDO's packages if we allow deviations in these. Of course, implementations can use deviations. A particular device can have deviations from a standard, but the standards cannot have deviations in themselves. Then we had some smaller fixes about cleaning up the language in the spec. So we used the schema terminology consistently. We had checksums for packages for a while, but they have been removed now. I think there is some value attached to this concept. You could verify that the modules are indeed the ones that you expect, so that even if people forget to add a revision statement when a module is changed, that will be detected by checksums. But there's also a bit of complexity in defining how to compute those checksums. I see that Charles has raised his hand.
Yeah, thanks. So I just had one question going back about that standards, creating a deviation of a standard. How do you envision biz versions working? Would there at least be a bit of a transition?
Well, I mean,
an IETF is a deviation, or I just forgot what's the right mechanism for that to illustrate that while it's in progress.
Yes, the sort of task force that's working with this is called the Yang versioning design team, right? So all of these 5 or 6 different documents are about versioning and how you handle things that are changing over time. So I think well, in any way, deviations are not the mechanism to communicate version changes. Deviations is for a vendor to say, I'm not fulfilling this spec completely, or at least not the way that it was intended exactly. But standards bodies should not use deviations ever. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No, not really, but I think I'm, but that's okay.
Okay, let me explain. Let me explain the.
I mean, I understand in theory that what the deviation's for. I had never thought about how it actually works when a standards organization updates their own specification with a biz version that is going to make a change to an existing standard, in which case it seems like that might look like a deviation, or I just don't know how that's being represented until the new standard actually becomes the standard. You know, I thought maybe there'd be some transition period where it might look like you might actually use deviation, but I don't know what type of statement you would actually use in that case.
No, it's not a statement like that. I mean, what you would see is a new version or new revision of the module or of the package.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay, yeah.
And then there are some rules for what you can and cannot do and still call it backwards compatible.
No, you're
and
right.
if you're
Okay.
if you are breaking those rules, you have to announce it as non-backwards compatible.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, checksums, we removed those because of the complexity, even though they have some merit. We talked about, or we're in closing the discussion about NBC changes in parents and history. And there was some mix up between version and revision statements in the terminology. So we cleaned that up. And we also had a discussion whether these version labels that we are talking about here could be applied to submodules as well. And we decided that we should allow it, but not require submodules to be versioned using our concepts here. Then we have a recent discussion that's been around API and implementation packages. So separating package definitions into two types, where API packages would be packages coming out of, say, standard bodies, or maybe a product line in a vendor that is standardized, putting together a package that will have many different implementations over time. And then we have the other type of package, which is an implementation package, which would then contain all the details, all the modules. Nothing is optional in an implementation package because it documents the actual implementation, and it may contain deviations then. And to separate these two could be useful because it's more clear than what you can and cannot do within a package. For example, in an API package, you wouldn't have any deviations, whereas in the implementation, you might. But it's also, we are trying to discuss to see exactly where is the line. Is it really worth the effort to separate this into two different kinds of packages? And what does that difference look like in the actual Yang then? Here are some examples. Okay, so we have been playing around with adding a package type leaf in the Yang package instance, and which could take a value of API or implementation. And we used to have something called mandatory feature in the package definition. But if this is an implementation package, it sounds kind of strange to say that it's a mandatory thing. Yeah, of course, it's here because we implemented it. So we decided that in that case to call it supported feature. That is more neutral to the two cases, the API case and the implementation case. And then we have this list on the bottom with the implements package, where you could list all of the packages that are implemented, whether they are part of the API or not. And then in Yang library, we would add a reference to the implementation package for schemas, so that you can see, you can move over from the Yang library world to the packages world if you like. And we are considering having 2 different lists of packages to make this even more clear, than to have a packages and the API and the packages implementation underneath. But this is still under discussion. We don't know. Here's an example of what they're going to look like. You have an API package that could be coming from IETF, so the IETF routing, for example. This corresponds rather well with how people think about modules and sets of modules. And the IETF routing would then consist of IETF network device, IETF BGP, and IETF IS in the particular versions. But it would also list packages that is compatible with, that we know that would work here, but it's not part of the package. So if a device says that it supports IETF routing, we would know it has IETF BGP and IS, but it would not necessarily have RIP, VRRP, and ACLs. But it's still valuable to have the information about compatible packages. You, as a designer, can pick packages that should work well together. And then on the right side, we have the implementation package example. We call it vendor router. And here you have things like supported features, which is not relevant for an API package. And it then lists all the packages it's implementing, for example, those that were required, IETF routing, along with network device and BGP and IS. But it also supports VRRP and ACLs. And it has some modules that are not part of any package really added on top of the thing. And in this case, we have this vendor BGP deviations module that is topping off the whole thing. So this is the sort of idea that we think about when it comes to packages for now. So this is discussion. Is this split between API and implementation packages useful, do you think? It's an open question to the floor. I'll wait another 10 or 15 seconds if somebody wants to say something. Otherwise, I'll move on.
So is your question of on a feature level or an implementation level? You know, are you asking, is this capability needed, or is this realization of that capability the right way to go?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm really asking for is this a concept that we should spend time on in the group? Do you think?
Okay, we have a few people in the queue. Benoit first, and then in room second, and then Tom next. Oh,
thank you.
Benoit Claes. So I think the implementation package is the most useful one out of the 2. The other one might be interesting. Let's see if the implementation package first works. If it does, then maybe it's a nice to have to say the IETF is proposing this bigger package that you call API. And by the way, APIs work to me because both of them are APIs. But the IETF is targeting this specific set of modules to work together. So if you have to focus in phases, well, obviously the implementation package 1 is the one to go with, in my mind. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
Tom Hill, BT. I'm going to say exactly the opposite of Benoit. I feel like the API packages are absolutely the type of package that I would prefer. I would much prefer my devices to do what I tell them instead of tell me what they would like to do. Thank you. But to answer the question,
can you repeat your name, please?
Useful discussion.
Thank you.
Can you repeat your name? I don't know who that was.
Tom Hill, BT.
Thanks, Tom.
No problem.
So I see myself next in queue, and I was going to say that something along the lines of Tom, that as from a provider standpoint or a user standpoint, I could see wanting to define a package and then have my vendor tell me what they actually do. So I think it's a useful concept also from both perspectives. Thanks. That was my comment.
Thank you. So we have been discussing with about how much optionality we should allow in a package. Of course, we want package to be a flexible concept so that you can say, yeah, okay, routing is here. That means you have BGP and ISIS, but you could also have VRRP and ACLs in there. And those are then listed as optional packages. But from a client perspective, this reduces the value of packages, because it would be nice if clients could just connect to a server and or see, oh, you have these 4 packages, and then I know what it means exactly. I know what I can do. Because if some things are optional, then it needs to drill down deeper and say, oh, so you have routing, but do you specifically have VRRP? So there's a lot more work for a client to figure out if things are optional. So then the second alternative is to not allow optional modules, but have this list of compatible modules that to make it easier for designers to figure out which combinations of packages might work well together. And this is still certainly being discussed. And we feel that probably are leaning a bit towards the second choice here, but it's still very open. And if we want to have optional modules, we have been designing it like this in the Yang. We have a field called optional, which could be true or false, and both for on the package level and on the module level. So it could be listed there if we wanted to have optional features in packages. And with option 2, it might look like this instead, that we don't have any optional leaf, but at the end, we have a separate list of compatible packages and compatible modules that are not part of the specification of this package, but could be seen as guidance for designers that are picking additional functionality. I see Charles.
Yeah, this is Charles, but actually, Tom, I just wanted to ask you to come back up because there were a couple questions regarding your statement. I think people didn't hear you well at the mic, so maybe just get a little closer to the mic. So we're having Tom Hill come back up again.
Hello. It was quite loud in the room, so I apologize if I wasn't well heard. Just to repeat what I said, I was going to point out the opposite of what Benoit had iterated. I am much more in favor of API packages than implementation packages. And the reasoning behind that is because I would like to define what my routers across multiple vendor types, multiple software versions, what they adhere to, and the packages that they would, and the modules that they would form into Yang, rather than query them and ask them what they can do. I need to be quite prescriptive about making sure that they are aligned in the Yang that they generate. And that's why I think I prefer the API package. I can see reasons for both, but I prefer the API package. I can't see any of the questions in the chat today. So were there any specifics?
No, just that they hadn't. Actually, let me see what exactly Scott said. He said, I didn't hear Tom very well, was the point about listing conformance as part of the package.
It's about enforcing conformance to a standard. I don't particularly see it, I don't see it extremely useful to have a router tell me what it can do if all of them are telling me something different. So as far as standardization goes, I would like to be more prescriptive. Thank you.
Benoit Claes. So I would like to come back to that as well. I understand as an operator that you want to request, Yang support as packages from multiple vendors. Now, and that's obvious, right? Now, Jan, can you go back to a previous slide where we're comparing this one exactly, right? So the one on the left is the list of things that typically you would ask from different vendors, right? And you would say, give me this set because I need to be interoperable, right? The one on the left. And then the one on the right is, okay, what are the vendors doing right now at different stages? That's the way I understand the one on the right, which is like, okay, you aspire to go to the one on the left, And right now, because there are different versions, it's life cycle, etc., you have the one on the right. So my question is it the right way to formalize the one on the left? And if you go back to your previous slide, Jan, right? This one, is it the right way, Tom, to formalize all this, the one from the IETF one in this format, because you want to compare easily what you want to have with what you are receiving right now from the different vendors, or just telling the vendors, this is my list of things I want in RFP is good enough? See my point?
It doesn't help me if some of my router vendors are producing Yang that is different to the others. So I can entirely see why we would want to have both types of packages. It might suit different operators, absolutely fine. But for me, lots of networks, lots of platforms, lots of vendors, and I don't want to write extra code. I need to be more prescriptive and focus on enforcing the left and not, we might forego some features, but we're also hoping to encourage interoperability across vendors, which is why I would like to be more prescriptive about the packages and the modules, rather than query the router and say, what can you do? Say, I would like you to do this specific thing.
So typically you would have what I see on the screen, the left one, and this is what you want to do.
What we have today is mostly the right.
Sorry?
What we have today is mostly the right.
Exactly. And
what
then you would have
what we need is the left.
exactly. And then you want to have toolings that would just compare two views, and you could just say, from a tooling point of view, this is not what I want. Vendor, you go back and upgrade your router, implement more, etc.
Yes. And if I can point at a package, an API package, and say, please support this, that's what I would like to see.
Thank you.
We have several more in queue. I don't know if Benoit and Tom want to stay around because it might be relevant. Robert? Or Rob, sorry.
Yeah. So Rob Wilton, speaking as a contributor. So I just wanted to emphasize that these two types of packages are solving different problems. As has been discussed here, that the API package is trying to give the specification of what functionality is desired, and the implementation package is giving the real implementation of saying, for a particular device, this is what it's doing. And you may have that implementation package just being served up from the device itself in the same way that Yang library gives you that information today. But it also allows a vendor to advertise that off the box and say, for my particular version of this OS, these the packages that I implement, the APIs that I implement, and I have these deviations because I can't implement them completely faithfully. But it allows the people who write the instrumentation code to know what those differences are. So it's about, one is about advertising what you want to be doing, and the other one is about advertising conformance that's mainly coming from a device.
Thanks, Rob.
Jeff?
I think
Hopefully you
Jeff's
can hear me.
next.
Okay, so I think we have Jeff Haas.
Yes. So I'm not directly following his work. I typically drop in his working group without having done my homework. The thing I'd observe here is that there's sort of a competing set of requirements, and we've touched on some of them. What I would sort of highlight as a desired behavior is as much as the thing on the left is what people may want. Here's a set of things that are supporting a set of protocols, and the modules are part of them. What is perhaps better to focus on is the top deliverable is for a given module. BGP is an example. It's going to have a set of dependencies of other modules, and what you're looking for is for that version of BGP, what is the compatible set of IETF modules that you pull in to be able to implement BGP or any of the other protocols. Ideally, just like with your favorite Linux distribution, when you have the sets of things that are compatible, the expectation is that a meta set of these things will all pull in compatible libraries across the board. So if I pull in BGP and it depends on IETF routing, and if I pull in ISIS, I should have an incompatible set of IETF routing. So what I think the left-hand side is sort of a list of what you want to be able to get if you were to have a particular combination. What we need to focus on is here's the individual item and the things that are dependencies, and then make sure that all of these sets harmonize with each other within some larger group. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, and then Balas?
Do you hear me?
Yes.
So I think it would be very interesting if we could specify a method or maybe even a tool that would say that does this implementation package fulfill the API package? Does it does it do everything that the API package is asking for? Thank you.
Thank you, Balash. Yeah, I think that's part of this discussion about optionality. We have been trying to make sure that the package definitions are such that if a package is announced, we will know rather quickly and easily from a client side if that package is fully implemented. We of course will have deviations that goes on top of this. It complicates the picture, but that is how we have been discussing. When it comes to this question here, actually what we wanted to know really was whether this concept of API separate from implementation package was a relevant concept. And from the discussions that came in here, I think we struck a chord. Definitely feels like the distinction here is meaningful to people. So that's a good thing to understand from this. Thank you. I only have a couple of slides left, I think. Let me go there. We talked about optional modules and how that would look. I think we have already talked about this. So the last thing is about schema mount. As I mentioned earlier, we have been thinking about what happens if you have a mount point in a module that's inside a package. Can we in some way convey to clients what they will find at that mount point? We have seen a number of different use cases, and for some of them, it's fairly easy to describe. You must find this, or you must find one of these. But in a more general, some of the more advanced use cases, it's kind of gets tricky to describe this. So we don't know exactly how far we should take this in a meaningful way. What we've been looking at here is for a Yang package instance to list the mount points here, and then you can have information about what packages that might be or must be found there. And I think that was everything we had from the package perspective in the versioning design team.
So I think any other questions?
No, none in the room, no one in the queue.
That's great. So that was your last slide, right, John?
Yes.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Chin. Let's see if I can get these slides. Okay, Chin, you should have control.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Jing. I'm going to present this self-describing data object tag, and the main objective is give a status update. The current version number is version 6. Recapture a little bit about why we propose this worker. Self-describing data object tag is really used to classify the data, especially for the operational data, and you can capture characteristic data, or for example, KPI data. So it's similar to the module tag, but the difference is module tag only used at the module level, and for data object tag used at the data node level. So self-describe describing data object tag can be used in streaming telemetry scenario. Tag to reduce amount of the data export to destination. So current status of this work has already passed through the young doctor last call review, and also we get a sufficient review from Adrian Farrell. So many thanks to Mahesh and Adrian. Change since the 04, and we actually make a two update. This is the we list actually the main change we have made. The first we add user tag committing clarification because in the draft we define not only user tag but also IETF tag and reserve tag. How user tag is distinguished from other tag. So we add some clarification. And second, we provide guidance to designate experts for evaluation of young data model tag registry and also young data object tag prefix registry. And we made a two update to the figure 1 and figure 2 with additional tags. And we also enhance the security section for the user tag management. And in addition, we actually, based on young doctor review, we changed the data object name into the short name. And also we made some other editorial changes to address the agent's comments and comments from young doctor review. And first, actually, we made an update to the figure 1 with additional tags. You can see in the version 4 in the left, actually, we only describe the several tag, object tag and the metric tag and the metric group tag, property tag, and discuss, just introduce the relation with the data object. So in the version 6, actually, we try to add additional tag because we already added the multi-source tag. So we change the metric group tag to metric type tag. So this kind of rewarding, and so you can see the change we have already made. And this kind of multi-source tag is not actually a new tag. It has already been defined in this worker, mostly used to capture the data object from multiple sources. So second change we actually made in the IANA section, actually, we really need to provide guidance for the designated experts for the assignment policy. So so we make a change to section 9.1 and section 9.2. And for section 9.1, we didn't actually add any specific guidance, but we added some statement actually to make sure the presumption of the code point can be granted hold. And in section 9.2, actually, we added the guidance for the designated experts and to allow the expert to verify the ANA associated tag to conform specific criteria defined in the RFC 5198. Next is the user tag format clarification. And as we clarify, we define the user tag and IETF tag and then also reserve tag. We only register IETF tag. For user tag, maybe conflict with other tag, for example, reserve tag. So because it can use the prefix start with user column, or it can have no prefix. So to address the issue, actually, we added some clarification text to make it clear. So you can see the change we have already made in the section 4.3 and also in the in the beginning of the section 4. And next is about tag management conflict resolving. We think this issue has been discussed on Netmod mailing list. Actually, this maybe not only apply to this draft, but also apply to the module tag that has already been published in the Netmod working group. And the problem is when one client add or remove the tag, for some other client may get wrong the data. So we talk with Adrian on the list about this, and we think or tag management are mostly done in the implementation stage, but we do see some cases that you may add or remove tag in the running timing stage. So how to deal with this? So to address this issue, we add some text in the security section to really restrict the client with a specific client level or specific privilege. And this issue we actually we posted on the list, and we only solicited feedback from module tag author, but haven't heard the feedback. And so for next step, we think all the issue we received has been addressed, and we are happy to receive any comments in this meeting. Yeah, thanks. Hello?
Yeah, hi, I'm in queue as contributor. If you don't mind going back one slide.
Which
so
one?
I'm not sure why tag is any different than a any other read-write leaf here or leaf list. You know, I don't see how it reveals anything additional than you would with anything that could be written from a client. So maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, this is actually based on the comments raised by the agent, and he think there's potential risk for this kind of tag management conflicting. And
so I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't see anything wrong with the text that you add. I just don't see that it's a unique vulnerability.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, Rob,
Go ahead.
you're in the queue.
I'm changing hats.
Rob Wilton as a
Rob?
participant.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rob Wilton as a participant. So I was just looking in the module and you use node instance identifier, which I think is the right answer. And it looks like that allows you to associate a tag with a particular instance in the data store, or also gives you the flexibility of leaving the keys out and associating a tag with all instances or a subset of the instances. My first question is that the intention? Seems like it's a good thing to do. And if it is, it may be helpful to sort of spell that out, to clarify that in the draft, that you have that flexibility when you're using this.
Yeah, we do have some example in the appendix actually to use this tag to apply to the instance data object. So we have such kind of flexibility. So do you think we need to add some of text in the normative part to spell this out?
I need to check. I only had a quick look, so maybe the text is there, but I think spelling that out if it's not there already would be helpful. So I'll just grepping it for the Yang type. So it might be there already, but it's useful to have it there if you can.
Okay, got it. Thank you. So any other comments?
Okay, thank you. I think that's all you have,
Okay,
right?
thank you. Yeah.
But so you think the document's ready for working group last call, right? So we didn't talk about that.
Yes.
So yeah, whether we last call immediately or not, it's good. It's a good time to get extra review from the working group. The chairs will discuss the working group last call after the meeting. Personally, I don't see any reason not to do that, but that's just one opinion. I'll definitely talk with the co-chairs.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're going to move it on to system-defined configuration. Give me a moment to switch slides.
Yeah, I think I have requested to share the slides. Oh, okay, I got it. Thank you. So hello everyone, this is Tufan, and this presentation is about the system-defined configuration work. And recently we have the Kent and Ian join this work. And so since last IETF meeting, there is still a lot of discussion on mailing list about the open issues of this work. So thank you everyone for getting involved in this work and sharing your great ideas about this work. And there are a few issues which I posted to the mailing list since last IETF meeting. If you can still remember that, maybe the most debatable one, must offline validation of running alone be required? Let's say that the client references a system-defined configuration which is not present in running actually, and maybe for online validation, the server can just accept it, but for offline validation, it will fail. And maybe we can say that the server can just validate running by validating intended. But it's true that both the 17.9.15 and 83.14.2 define that running must always be valid. And also to maintain backward compatibility, especially for those legacy clients which are heavily rely on the offline validation of running. We don't really want to break those clients and the existing implementations. So the authors decided to answer yes to this first question. Yes, we think that must offline validation of running alone be required. And the second issue, should the origin be system or intended for system configuration, which is copied and pasted into running? I think we received different opinions about this issue, but more folks seem to incline to use intended as the value of origin. But it's also okay to use origin ecosystem. Its value keeps unchanged. So the current draft doesn't really limit which origin should be used about this issue. And then the third issue about immutable flag, it has already been defined in another individual draft, since we may not restrict this flag to system configuration only. So the following presentation given by me will talk about this issue. I will present this. And then the last bullet, should the with origin parameter be supported for intended? Currently, this parameter with origin can only be supported for operational data store. And we think that since system configuration may also be present in intended, and clients may benefit from this with origin parameter being used for retrieving intended. However, we find it's not easy actually to support this idea because there is a one statement with a derived from ourself function defined in this with origin parameter leaf data node. So I would rather keep it as it is without more extension about this parameter. So if there is no any other comments, the authors would like to close these four issues. After we have, oh, I saw Kent in the queue. Do you want to say something, Kent?
Yes, I can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. On the last point, I'm wondering, I mean, I do understand that it's defined the derived from or self when expression, but we could, I think this RFC could update that other RFC if necessary and extend the expression so that it could be operational or system. And because it expands the scope, it wouldn't break any existing modules. So I just don't know if the reasoning behind not moving forward with this is, just because that's what it is currently, another, and we don't want to update the other RFC is justified. We should probably discuss what do we want, and then decide whether or not it's worth updating the RFC.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, we can discuss about this issue further. Yeah, maybe we can do that.
Rob Wilton as a participant. So I'm conflicted on one about must running always alone be valid. So although I agree that it's always useful to be able to validate running, so you should have that capability, I do wonder about whether that makes life difficult. So if you're creating interfaces today, I think the interface, IETF interface's Yang model allows the interface type to be instantiated by the system and to then be added in. And I don't know what the answer there is. Are we saying that actually we want to always force clients to specify that interface type whenever they configure an interface to make that like a valid configuration? Or are we saying that actually we allow the system to instantiate that value in running, which again is sort of breaking the idea of the running data store always being in control of the client, or is the reality that actually the system will inject an interface type as it needs to and then do the validation against the intended data store so the value's there as required. So I think it would be potentially useful if we wrote down the actual configuration steps for that example, and there's agreement as to how this should work and how this should behave to understand what the actual operational steps would be for this, and to check that that makes sense.
Okay. Blush, do you want to say something?
Yes, just reacting to Rob. There are a number of other SDOs, for example, 3GPP, which explicitly state that some items are created by the system. So if we would want to restrict that in any way, that would be a big problem. Thank you.
Jean?
It's my turn to go? Yes,
Okay,
thank
we
you.
hear you now.
Yep. So I think that if we want to go ahead with this Yang project where we can reason about configurations, we should stick to those formal rules about what's in the configuration should really be there, as just as the configuration, the Yang specifications already say. But what we can do, and what this draft is already stating, is that if you have a client that understands that the system might create things, it can request the system to fill in things by adding a flag to the edit config or edit data operations. So I just want to make sure that existing clients that are not expecting any sort of interference with running can expect that to go on to continue like that. But where clients that would prefer the system to do things automatically can ask for that. Thank you.
Yes, I think maybe the intention here is to keep the legacy clients can working normally, and we do not really want to break those clients which heavily rely on the validation of running alone. So maybe this is intention about the first issue.
Yes, I just want to add that it's not exactly the validation that is the problem here. The clients can validate or not, but it's the reasoning about the data on the server that gets broken if things are interfered with in runtime without letting the clients know.
Okay, thank you.
I think as long as the system creates things in a predictable and well-defined way, that is usable.
If it's not described clearly in Yang, which it cannot be today, then it's not. Then you still rely on the developer to have additional information besides the Yang in order to do that. And that's what I would like to leave behind.
You would be killing 3GPP Yang modeling.
Not at all. You just need to define some additional attributes or for edit config and so on. And this draft is actually defining one such attribute.
I'll have a look at it, but I have in 3GPP, for example, there are, and in some other places, there are Yang extension statements explicitly stating that this or that is created by the system.
Yes. We can, of course, discuss whether such extensions are supposed to not necessarily be understood by clients, but this is at least fairly close to have declared something.
But at least until now, there was no restriction on the system itself updating the running configuration. I hope it stays like that, but let's discuss.
So Rob Wilton as a participant, sort of back to Jan's comment. So just trying to understand, are you saying that what you think the best way of achieving this is that having an extra option to the edit config request explicitly says, I want you to copy the system parameters into running, and that would allow a client to effectively provide a partial configuration that, for example, leaving out the interface types, and by having that explicit, you copy this into running, it then becomes valid and can be validated. And a client doesn't necessarily have to then pull that configuration back up again. It could always leave it slightly different. Is that what you're suggesting?
That's what I'm suggesting, and that's what's already in the draft right now.
Yeah, I will present about this later.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
By the way, you're a bit over time, but we had some extra time at the end of the session, so we'll give it to you. But
yeah,
try
okay.
to in about 10 minutes.
So since we have quite a lot of discussion on the mailing list, and the authors try to update the draft and reflect some working group feedback into the new version. And as I listed here, the most dramatic change compared to the previous draft is that instead of saying that there is no need for offline validation of running alone be required, and the client or the server can validate running via validating intended, we here admit the requirements of validation of offline validation of running alone, and define that any referenced system configuration in system data store must be present in running to make running valid. And since we already defined that the reference system configuration must appear in running, we don't really need the with system parameter, which is used to return a merged view of running and the system configuration previously. So we have just to remove the definition of this with system parameter. Another change is about that the convenient, because if people can still remember that we used to have an object called convenient, we want to avoid or at least reduce having copied the entire contents of system configuration into running when possible. So we have defined another parameter, resolve system. And this is used for edit config and edit data operation, and it indicates to allow the server to populate the reference system configuration automatically to make the running configuration valid without the client doing the option explicitly. And the server can auto-populate of the data store only when this parameter is provided. And for legacy clients, which know nothing about this parameter, they don't see any change in the edit config or edit data operations. So this is about the draft updates. And there are some quotations from the current draft, which I think is important for understanding the ideas and the principles of the draft. So I just give some quotations here. The very first one, that server must ensure that running contains any referenced system objects. As I have mentioned, in addition to being consistent with the definitions of in existing RFCs, we are intended to maintain the backward compatibilities for Lexi clients here. And clients must either explicitly configure system-defined nodes in running or use the resolve system parameter. If the first sentences say that the reference system configuration must be present in running, I think this sentence answers the question of how can it be in running. There are two ways, right? Clients can explicitly configure the system-defined nodes if they do not want the system to touch the configuration actually, or they can use a resolve system parameter for convenient. So two ways define that. And only system-aware clients copy reference system nodes from system. How clients are aware of the system data store can find appropriate configurations are beyond the scope of this document. And obviously, the system data store is designed as a standard mechanism to allow the clients to see what system configuration is available. But for Lexi clients that know nothing about this document, so it's out of scope how they can find the system configurations. And the last one, if the resolve system parameter is not given by the client, the server must not modify running in any way not specified by the client. There is a desire to let the client own the configuration. So there used to be an objective mentioned in the draft. It's the client control. The configurations should be totally controlled by the client. So we just think that even the server is allowed to configure the reference system configuration automatically. It is only triggered by the resolve system parameter. So the server's modification to running without being asked can never be allowed. Yeah, Blush, I saw you in the queue.
Sorry, this last bullet, if I'm not misunderstanding it, this is a very big MVC change, and different clients might have different ideas about this. So I'll have to check on this, but this for me is a showstopper. And there are some other SBOs like 3GPP or ORAN very clearly state that some things, some list entries are only created by the system itself. So this would, I don't see how this last bullet can work together with those things.
Okay, yeah, Kent, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, Kent as chair. Balaj, can you repeat that? Or the last bullet on slide 4? Can you?
Yes, here it says that except for some cases, the server must not modify running. In a number of other SDOs, most notably in 3GPP and I think also in ORAN, there are Yang modeled objects where you have a sentence that this object is created by the system only. So the client is not even allowed to create that object. We have around, I don't know, 160 Yang models in 3GPP, and some of them depend on the system to be able to modify the running configuration. Now, this seems to be in conflict with the last bullet.
I think I understand. So now I'm going to switch to speaking as contributor. I remember several years back when we were working on Yang Next. I forget which city we were in, but you were at that time talking about 3GPP's need to dynamically create configuration. I don't believe there's a lot of support for that. Being able to do that.
I think there are a big number of companies in 3GPP participating in this standardization. So you don't have a big enough support. And I'm not asking for anything. I'm just asking you to not to do a big NBC change. That's all I'm asking. Because until now, it is allowed for the system to modify the running configuration. If you say that from now on it's not allowed, that's a big NBC change.
We need to discuss this. I think the appropriate thing would be for 3GPP to put the system created things into the system data store. I understand that that didn't exist before, but that's what it should have been. That they moved forward anyway with an effectively unapproved non-standard approach is something that we should discuss whether or not the IETF caters to.
I don't think I until now ensured that it was nowhere restricted that the system can itself update the running, and I don't know about any of the Yang RFCs that would restrict it until now. So I don't agree with your statement that it's a not approved approach.
It was actually just discussed on the mailing list not that long ago. And in fact, I think there was a vigorous discussion about how the system can act like a client and itself make the update to running as a client. And that whole discussion was, in fact, to avoid the appearance of system or the server making changes automatically. But please, let's take this offline.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was just, this is Lou as contributor. I was just going to comment, if there's no RFC that precludes something, we can't say that it's not allowed just an email. You know, if we have to go by the documents, and if the documents are quiet on a topic, you know, we generally in the IETF said that's allowed behavior. So we should think about when we start adding new restrictions, the implication on someone who might be doing something that wasn't specifically precluded. So I guess I'm agreeing with Balazs here that his point is something we should consider in this document of how to deal with clients. Sorry, how to deal with Yang models and implementations that might have been doing something that was not previously discussed in any document.
We did have this discussion more than once or in the last few years. And that's why I say that I always took care to remove any statements that would preclude, to prohibit this behavior. And also, we risk really alienating a big community, 3GPP and all the radio operators, if we force them to avoid Yang. They have, at this point, two solution sets, one based on Yang and Netconf, the other based on JSON schema and OpenAPI. It would be very easy for them to say that, okay, then we forget Yang because it's not good for us. I don't think we want to do that.
Yeah, and more than that, this is a change in allowed behavior. You know, before the document was silent, our documents, I don't think anywhere talked about this explicitly in an RFC. So we had something that was allowed in existing RFCs. This changes that. So I think we have to take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you. So there is an open issue. We have some discussion on the mailing list about this issue, but not much. And I'd like to receive some more feedback here. So we have proposed a result system parameter, and the question is, this result system parameter valuable for us? We propose this parameter for convenience, and we would like the client to avoid or at least reduce copying the entire contents of system configuration into running when possible. And especially for RESTconf protocol, where a complete understanding of the server's configuration is really desired, and injecting multiple disjoint pieces of the configuration is perceived as complicated. So But this parameter also brings us some implementation complexity. When the server resolving the leaf reference, the server must be able to identify if the missing referenced instance is system defined. And then the server must be able to configure the reference system defined instance into the targeted data store. And I'm also thinking that when the server's auto-populating is enforced should depend on the target data store. For example, if the target data store is running or set up, the operation should be enforced at the end of the edit config or edit data operation. And if the target data store is candidate, maybe it's delayed until a commit or valid operation takes place. So I believe this follows the young constraint enforcement module defined in the RFC 7915. So after the evaluation of how much value it brings and how difficult or complex it will be to implement, does the value of this parameter deserves such an implementation complexity? So this is an open issue for discussion. Any comments on this?
You're pretty much out of time, so I think you should try to wrap up, and then any more discussion has to be on the list.
Yeah, this is the last slide.
Perfect,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
So one thing I was expecting on your last slide was a request for adoption. It's clear you're generating a lot of discussion, so at least we should resolve those points. That we still have the question of whether or not the group wants to adopt, but I think that with the current open issues, it would be a little bit contentious. So if you can address those and then come back to the working group with changes, that would be great.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if there is no other comments, I will put this open issue to the oh, there is another open issue raised by Kent on the mailing list about this one. So let's move into the next presentation.
Okay, you should be able to present.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So this is about the immutable metadata annotation, and as I mentioned earlier, this idea immutable flag is derived from the system-defined configuration work, because there are some system configurations which are generated to be non-deletable or even non-modifiable to clients. They are config true but read-only to clients, but some are read-only while others can be modified. So allowing some configurations modifiable while others not is inconsistent and introduce confusion actually. So to resolve this issue, we want to define a standard mechanism to see what system configuration is read-only to clients. And if there exists some system configurations which are generated to be immutable, we want to make this information visible to clients. So this is about the motivation. So a metadata annotation called immutable has been defined to indicate the immutability of a data node. Although this concept is motivated by system-defined configuration, we do not really want to restrict this flag to being used only for system configuration. And it's used to annotate instance of young data nodes rather than schema nodes. And after it's created, any data node annotated with immutable equal true is read only to clients, which means modification or deletion should not be allowed. But the following operations should be allowed, like create an immutable data node with a same value initially set by the system if it does not exist in the data store. the immutable system configuration is not present in running, and the client can configure it with the same value as found in system data store into running. So this should be allowed. And delete the parent node of an immutable data node unless the parent node is also annotated with immutable equal true. For example, we cannot really delete a leaf data value inside a list instance, but it's okay to delete the whole list entry, which includes that immutable leaf instance. So this is about the delete operation, which should be allowed. Here gives some example about how to use this flag. So on the left side of the slide, there is an interface configuration with an immutable type. When the client retrieves a targeted data store like system and got such a reply, it should realize that the type for interface ETH0 is read-only and it should not be allowed to modify it. But the server should accept an edit config operation towards running to configure the interface ETH0 configuration with the same value of the type as in system. And any other values should not be accepted, it should be rejected. And on the right side of the slide, there is a system-defined NAC rules with the leaf list and the list entries annotated with immutable equal true. The username here is defined as a leaf list. The user admin for the admin group and guest for the group visit is generated to be immutable, which means that deletion is not allowed. And the rule list instance for the admin SL is also immutable, so any modification and deletion to this list entry is not allowed. While the other list entries, like the rule list entry for visit SL, the annotation for this entry is not specified, and the default is the same as the parent node of the same as the immutable value of its parent node, which is the NAC in this example. So, and the default immutable value for top level data node is false. So this is about the examples of how we can use this immutable annotation. So there are some open issues about this work, and the first issue is the backward compatibility. What if the Lexi clients receive some annotations they do not understand? And we have two options here. Option one is that annotations always return, but the client ignore unknown annotations silently. And option two is to define a parameter in the operation request to indicate including an immutable annotation in its response. And the current draft follows option one, but I have such a concern that the design may break the Lexi client. But maybe I think it's okay because there is a fundamental requirement defined in the 79.15.2. It says that the annotations set by a server should not break clients that do not support them. So this is about the first issue. The second is that how would the client know if immutable is applied to the whole list, the list entries, or both? The same applies to the leaf list, because these annotations can only be attached to individual list or leaf list instance. Then how should we indicate the immutability of the whole list or leaf list? So the whole list or the whole leaf list. So that the client can understand that the additions or deletion to the list or leaf list is not allowed. I think this is a question. So then the third one is that when should the server reject modifications to immutable data node? And the current draft said that the error reporting is performed at various different times according to the selected target data store. So we all know that if there is an attempt to modify an immutable data node, the server should reject it. But when should it reject? if the target data store is running or startup should be in an edit config or edit data operation. And if the target data store is candidate, the reject is delayed until a commit or valid operation takes place. The last issue is that should we allow the client to delete an immutable system initiated node in running? Yeah, because I know that there seems no way to actually delete system-defined configuration in system, because we already defined that the deletable system configuration must be defined in factory default, and the non-deletable system configuration must be defined in system, and system data store will be merged into intended and merged into operational. So even the client delete an immutable system node in running, it will still print in operational if it is taking effect. So, but I also like to ask to the working group, should we allow this operation? Okay, I know Rob in the queue, but this is my last slide. So go ahead, Rob.
So Rob Wilton, as a participant contributor, so not as a participant. So whereas the previous work on the with systems data store, I'm quite supportive of that. I think that's solving a good thing. I have a bigger concern here that if we allow servers to arbitrarily decide that some configuration is immutable, that makes life much harder for generic clients, because they won't know up front, just from the schema, what things are immutable, what things may be immutable and what things aren't. So it feels to me that having immutable config makes life harder for clients, and ideally we shouldn't have it, is my opinion. Now, I know that Balazs may feel differently for his implementations or the 3GPP stuff that uses this. So, so I have concerns there. So I think another way to look at this may be as a way of not encouraging immutable configuration, but a way of describing it if it is there. In which case, I think that for like your first question, your option 2 of having a request that returns a parameter that says return this seems like a better choice to me. So it allows you to annotate stuff that's immutable. It doesn't say encourage and say you should do this. And I don't think it should sort of change the behavior of the server either way. It's just providing some extra metadata that comes back out. And then so for the last one, in terms of should we allow a client to delete an immutable system data node, I think the answer to that should almost be yes, in the sense that if you move from one entire configuration to another entire configuration, any cases where you have arbitrary restrictions on that makes it very hard for clients. Lots of operators like to be able to do like a commit replace of the entire configuration, and anything where you say, oh no, you're accidentally changing a type from a valid type to another valid type for an interface, for example, that just makes their instrumentation code harder.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Rob to the sense that these sort of restrictions certainly make the life more complicated for a client. But on the other hand, the RFCs are already saying that, I mean, the 7950 and so on, they are already saying that a server can reject any configuration for any reason, basically. So we are already in the dark when it comes to rejections. They can happen anytime for any reason. But this initiative here to at least tag things with immutable helps the clients to at least have a chance at knowing where these restrictions sit. So I think it's a step in the good direction. But I agree completely with Rob's general view that any sort of restrictions on this is making life more complicated. And I generally prefer a more permissive view where clients can write anything. And if the server doesn't like it, it will say, okay, operationally down or wrong type of hardware or whatever it is, and not execute on it, but allow the configuration to go through. Thank you.
I think to respond Ian and Rob, I think this is not really a restriction, because there does exist some system configuration which is read-only generated to be immutable to clients. There does exist such kind of system configuration, and we just want to make this information visible to the clients. Okay, Balash, go ahead.
So I think it's very interesting and important work. I'm not up to date. Sorry, I will catch up. But I would just like to list 3 use cases that are already in use in different systems that might profit from this. One is, again, 3GPP and some other SDOs are using something called invariant, which means that once you created, let's say, a leaf, you cannot change it. And we might say that this is not a good idea. I might even agree with it, but it's the fact of life. And we either support that or they'll put Yang extension statements on that, or will not document. It still will work that way, just it's not documented in Yang anyway. So this invariant, yeah, it's there. They are using it for the last 10 years and they won't stop using it. The other thing that we have discussed a number of times was capabilities, where, yeah, you would like to say that, I don't know, I support reporting periods 1, 5, 20, and whatever, and I want those to be visible, and I want those to be static. No new values created, no new old values removed. That's again something that's already in use. And another use case, I don't know that if this is the correct tool for that, is system created and system enforced access control rules, where we say that this thing in the configuration must be there, and no one is ever allowed to remove it. Some implementations are using such immutable rules for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Rob Wilton, as well as a participant again. So just sort of back to Jan's comments and Balazs's, I think that I feel that providing metadata information to tell clients about how the system is behaving is fine and good. I just want to make sure that by doing this work, we don't sort of encourage this is a good thing to be doing. So I think we need to have some sort of warnings to say, this document should document the problems of having the immutable configuration and why you might want to avoid it. But if you do have it, here's how you can tell the client about it.
I would like to agree, and there are a few specific places, like typically complete restore, backup, copy config, replace full config that are problematic in this area. So we could and should list them, but yeah, they are still a fact of life. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more thing, if I may. This draft says that immutable is aimed at instance data. But when,
yes, right.
Yeah. But even in your second bullet here, when you say that immutable is applied to the whole list, to me that seems more like a schema level immutable. And actually that's what we need in some cases. Because
yes, I agree.
If I think about it, you could have a third value instead of yes and no on the metadata saying that all elements. But what if you don't have any entries at all and the list is still immutable? Then you have no place in the instance data to state that it is immutable.
Yeah, I still have 1 minute left, so yeah, can't.
I just wanted to mention that I think invariant is very different from immutable, and I don't want to treat that in the same way. We can talk about that later, but
okay, thank you.
Very separate.
And I was just going to ask for a clarification on a previous point, but if we're running out of time, it's okay.
Okay, is there anything else? No more questions. Thank you very much for this, and we're going to move on to the last presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, and you should have slide control.
Oh, okay. Okay. How to get slide control? Okay, here I got it. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm Italo Busi. I'm presenting this draft, which has been submitted to TIS because the technical content of the draft is related to the TIS work. But we have some doubts on the process that we can follow to move this draft forward, and we would like. And this issue can be more generic than just this document. We would like to get the feedbacks from the Netmod working group. So what is the problem we are trying to address? We need to do a tiny and backward compatible update to a YAM module, in this case the IETF types, which is already published into an IETF RFC. And actually the change that we need to do in this specific case is just a new type def and a new grouping with 2 leaves. So it's a very small update, but which is blocking some other work. And there is some reluctances from the people on moving those definitions in these D types because of the BIS approach. We didn't find any other approach at this moment in time to update a YAM module after being published in RFC than doing the BIS. The problem of the BIS is that the base RFC is a very long RFC, and I counted 84 pages in the PDF version, and it doesn't contain only one module. It contains other modules, another module which does not need to be updated. So it's not very clear what will happen to that module if we obsolete RFC 8776. And the content that we want to publish is quite mature because it's something which is already present in working group documents, some of which are in working. Actually, the working group also started a few minutes ago on one of them, and we just want to make them in the types to make available to a broader scope than just the documents and the YAM modules where they have been originated. So because of the dependency and the maturity of the dependent work, we need to have a fast approach or a fast process to get these changes approved by the IETF without delaying the process of the other working group documents. And the BIS is quite a heavy document. What's happening? Okay, yeah. So what do we need? Okay, this line number 3 is more about the content, and as I said, is a new type def and a new grouping, which is coming from working group documents. And the next slide is about what do we propose, so to have a fast solution. So what we propose is to have this new document, this new draft, which is updating rather than obsoleting the RFC 8776, and it is defining a new revision of the IETF types, only of the IETF types, such that the documents that depends on these definitions can import this new version. In this slide, I'm using the Semver label just to simplify the slide to understand, to clarify which one is draft, which one is approved, and which one is an update of which. And then other drafts can still import the T packet types from the RFC 8776 if they don't need any update for that module. So as you see, there are other documents which are quite mature, which will depend now from this new document. So we need to have some fast approach in the standardization to avoid stalling the progress of something which is ready for publication. And what are the issues that we have? The first issue is that we want to limit the scope of the work to make it fast only to what we update, so the tiny and backward compatible updates that we need. And for the proposed solution that we would like to follow with this document is to include in the main body of the RFC text only the changes, not the definitions which are already in RFC 8776. However, by doing only the changes, we are afraid that we create some problem with the YAM toolchain like RFC strip or the YAM catalog, which is extracting the whole module from the RFC. So to solve this problem, the proposal is that we can include the whole module revision into an appendix. This appendix is just providing the complete revision, and we can consider this appendix as out of scope for the review and comment. It is there just to allow the tooling to work. But now we have a possibility to get the text in the main body and the text in the appendix to go out of sync. So to make sure that there is alignment, we can generate the text in the main body with an automatic simple diff tool. We propose one in the document. If there are better tools, we are willing to take them into account. Such that by running, basically what we are doing, we are updating the YAM module in the appendix, run the tool and get the new RFC in one shot, and keep consistency between the main body and the appendix. So what is the next steps? We would like to get feedbacks from Netmod working group and also from the ADs about the proposed process, whether the process that we would like to use to update an existing model is reasonable, and then we can progress the technical content of this document through this working group following the working group normal process. Thank you. And in the backup, there are some, and there's in the drafts we describe additional alternative options that we have evaluated and why we think these approaches will be better. Thank you.
Mahesh?
Yes.
All right, Mahesh Chetanandani, Arcus. So I just wanted to give you my experience having gone through this recently. We had just published RFC, the BFT Yang module, and had to go through a process of actually correcting the proposed model. So it was a backward incompatible change, so which may not be exactly what you're looking at. But I think in terms of a process, it was it's similar. So what we had to do was we had multiple modules, first of all, in the draft, and only one of them was being updated. So we went ahead and made the change in that model, and of course updated with a new date stamp. So that essentially indicated that it was an updated module. We then went ahead and added an explanation in the appendix section describing what the change was. And finally, if there were any other modules that were dependent on it, those were also updated to reflect the fact that they, even if they were not being directly impacted, that the model that they were referring had changed, so therefore it had to undergo a change also. So I think in summary, those are the set of changes. Now, I don't know as far as fast or slow, the approach is still taking months. So we still haven't finalized, the draft is still not approved, and this is about 3 months old at this point.
But you did a BIS, correct?
Sorry, what was the question?
Did you publish an RFC BIS?
Yes, so we published it as an RFC BIS. So you will see, I think it's called RFC 9127 BIS.
Yeah. There's a, Jeff put it into the chat. Mahesh, before you go away, I know you've already walked, just to clarify, you updated the versions even of the modules that were not changed.
I believe so. Let me confirm that by taking a look. We had to update some of the dependent, what I call the dependent modules, but let me confirm that. Give me a sec.
Yeah, I think that's an important point of what to do with the modules that aren't being changed in the document. Thanks. I think, Rob, you're next.
Yeah, so Rob Bolton. So my thoughts on this is, I think that because this is a backwards compatible update to that module, I don't have any issues with this going into a separate draft that's updating that base draft. And I have no issues with it updating just one of those modules. I think that's okay, and I think the dependencies will work. If you go back to your previous slide, please, I wasn't so sure about your proposal of effectively having a diff in the main part of the draft and a full version of the appendix. I think you'd be better off just putting the latest version of the module in the main body of the draft, because that's what you're now publishing, and then having some text, which could be in the introduction, it could be in the appendix, that flags what's been added or what the differences are. And I think in terms of the review process, you just need to make sure that when this goes to Yang Doctor's review or and through the ISG review, we're saying, look, these are the only things that are changing. And if that's highlighted, I think most ADs will be happy just to do a diff review of the new stuff. They won't review other stuff that's already there. So that's what I would propose.
So you propose to put the main body and to let the chairs and the authors and the AD to figure out that what they comment is only on the deltas.
I mean, you can always add a comment in that's removed by the RFC editor at the top of the document saying, please, this is the only thing that's changed. Please focus the review on these parts. And then that gets deleted later.
Okay.
But that seems reasonable to me.
Okay.
Sorry if I'm jumping the queue.
Well, we have Jeff, who's
Okay, I was just going to answer the question that Lou asked about did we have to update the other modules? The answer was yes. So what we changed was the types module, and if any of the modules imported the types module, then we also bumped the revision date on those modules that were importing the updated module.
Right, and to expand on what
So
Manish is saying,
sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
There is some controversy as to what we ended up doing. So what the language requires us to do at the moment is just simply bump the things that are directly impacted. There was a long set of threads where we attempted to get the Yang doctors to chime in on this, where Tom Petch basically wanted us to have every single thing that used this module also bumped in some fashion. We did so primarily for BFD, but he was sort of pushing to have this done across the board. I don't think that's necessarily reasonable. What I would suggest is most of this thread is available on the BFD mailing list, and I would suggest taking a look at it because that's effectively a procedure that's under debate right now.
I'm going to assume Rob. Good. Rob removed himself. Yeah, I think Italo, Rob gave you the solution that you want, which is just do a just take the module that you want to modify and put it in its own document that updates this base the base RFC rather than do a this. And I think that covers the narrow case that you're discussing. The BFD conversation is much more interesting because it's NBC, but I think Rob is giving you a solution that'll allow you to move quickly and only update the piece that you want. I do also want to echo the comment that Rob made that going forward with a way that requires new tooling is probably not the way to go. And creating new ways of defining modules with diffs and things like that is just likely going to cause a lot of confusion. Now, the narrative part of your text, of course, can highlight the differences, but the module part should be a normal module that our tooling supports.
Okay, and maybe we can put some comments to clarify what has added here. Okay, we can follow that approach. We can, yeah. Thank you.
With that, we're actually a little over. And thank you all for a good session, and look forward to hopefully seeing you in person in Philadelphia.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, and Charles, thank you for supporting us in the room.
Yeah, you bet. You and Kent made it easy for me.
Thank you, Charles.
Appreciate it.